Have you ever felt something quietly tugging at you? A feeling you couldn't explain, a heaviness in your chest that no one else seemed to notice? That's not random. That's your inner voice, your emotional radar, whispering, pay attention. And here's the truth, the universe rarely screams. At first, it whispers. But when you keep ignoring those whispers, they grow louder, harsher, until they turn into chaos, heartbreak, or burnout. We live in a world obsessed with pretending everything is fine. We post the smiles, wear the masks, and keep walking even when our spirit is waving a red flag, but silence doesn't heal what's breaking inside you. Awareness does. There are 5 subtle warnings our heart gives before it shatters, before our boundaries collapse, before we lose ourselves completely. These are not just emotional signs. They are survival signals, gentle nudges from the part of you that still remembers who you are, and ignoring them, that's how we drift, that's how we lose connection to others and more painfully to ourselves. So today I want you to lean in. Don't just listen to my words, feel them, because these warnings are already around you, inside you, waiting to be seen. And when you finally pay attention, everything changes. The first subtle warning is the feeling of emotional exhaustion that you keep explaining away. You say you're just tired, but it's not your body that's drained. It's your soul. You've been carrying too much for too long. The pretending that being strong means never needing rest. We'll start there with the quiet kind of exhaustion that doesn't just steal your energy, it steals your joy. Have you ever felt something quietly tugging at you? A feeling you couldn't explain, a heaviness in your chest that no one else seemed to notice? That's not random. That's your inner voice, your emotional radar whispering, pay attention. And here's the truth. The universe rarely screams at first. It whispers. But when you keep ignoring those whispers, they grow louder, harsher, until they turn into chaos, heartbreak, or burnout. We live in a world obsessed with pretending everything is fine. We post the smiles, wear the masks, and keep walking even when our spirit is waving a red flag. But silence doesn't heal what's breaking inside you. Awareness does. There are 5 subtle warnings our heart gives before it shatters, before our boundaries collapse, before we lose ourselves completely. These are not just emotional signs. They are survival signals, gentle nudges from the part of you that still remembers who you are, and ignoring them, that's how we drift. That's how we lose connection to others, and more painfully to ourselves. So today I want you to lean in. Don't just listen to my words, feel them, because these warnings are already around you, inside you, waiting to be seen. And when you finally pay attention, everything changes. The first subtle warning is the feeling of emotional exhaustion that you keep explaining away. You say you're just tired, but it's not your body that's drained. It's your soul. You've been carrying too much for too long, pretending that being strong means never needing rest. We'll start there with the quiet kind of exhaustion that doesn't just steal your energy, it steals your joy. There comes a moment when you stop feeling moved. You're surrounded by people, but it's like watching life through a glass wall. You nod, you smile, you respond, but nothing seems to reach your heart anymore. That's not indifference, that's emotional disconnection. And it's the second subtle warning you can't afford to miss. This warning doesn't arrive with sirens. It slips in quietly after one too many disappointments, one too many times of showing up for others when no one showed up for you. So little by little, your heart learns to protect itself. It starts building walls instead of bridges. You tell yourself you're fine, that you're just busy. But deep down, you miss feeling, you miss the spark, the laughter that used to come so easily, the tears that once felt like release. You start living on autopilot, producing, managing, but not being. And here's what's most dangerous: when disconnection becomes your new normal, when numb feels safer than vulnerable, when silence feels easier than explaining. When you start convincing yourself that you're okay with being unseen, but you're not meant to live half alive. You're meant to feel deeply even when it hurts, because feeling, even pain, is proof that your heart is still open, still capable of healing. Emotional disconnection is your soul's way of saying, I'm scared to feel again, but I miss myself. It's a whisper that says you've been protecting your heart instead of nurturing it. So how do you respond? You soften. You stop pretending that detachment equals peace. You let a little light in a conversation, a moment of truth, a single tear you no longer hold back. Because reconnection doesn't begin with others. It begins when you decide to reconnect with you. You replay every word, every look, every silence over and over until it eats away at your peace. You analyze people's tone, their pauses, their distance. You wonder what you did wrong or what you could have done better, that endless loop of what ifs. And maybe if I had, that's not awareness anymore. That's mental overdrive. And it's the third subtle warning you can't afford to miss. Overthinking pretends to protect you. It says, if I can just figure this out, I won't get hurt again. But what it really does is chain you to the past. It's your mind trying to control what your heart is too afraid to feel. And instead of finding clarity, you find confusion. Instead of safety, you find exhaustion. You see Overthinking is what happens when trust erodes, trust in others, and most painfully, trust in yourself. Somewhere along the way, you started believing that your feelings were mistakes that needed fixing instead of messages that needed listening. And here's the truth. Your mind was never meant to carry what only your heart can heal. When you live in your head too long, you stop hearing your intuition, that quiet, wise part of you that already knows what's right. You drown it out with fear, logic, and imaginary scenarios that never existed. But awareness, real awareness, doesn't come from dissecting everything that happened. It comes from accepting it. It comes from letting go of the story your mind keeps replaying and choosing to live in the moment you're actually in. The next time you catch yourself spiraling, pause and ask, what am I really afraid to feel right now? Because underneath every loop of overthinking lies an emotion you've been avoiding: hurt, rejection, guilt, or grief. And the moment you face that feeling with compassion instead of judgment, your mind begins to quiet. The noise fades, the peace returns. You smile when you want to cry. You say it's okay when it isn't. You bend until you almost break, all in the name of keeping the peace. That's not kindness. That's self-abandonment disguised as love. And it's the fourth subtle warning you can't afford to ignore. It starts so innocently. You just want to be liked, accepted, understood. You don't want to disappoint anyone. So you say yes when your soul screams no. You give more than you have, hoping that maybe, just maybe, someone will finally see your worth. But here's the heartbreaking truth. When you build connection by betraying yourself, you lose both them and you. People-pleasing is emotional camouflage. It makes you feel safe because you're avoiding conflict. But what you're really avoiding is authenticity. You start living a version of yourself that fits everyone else's comfort, but your own truth. You become the caretaker of everyone's emotions except your own. And the price? It's steep. You start resenting the very people you once tried so hard to please. You begin to feel invisible, unheard, unvalued, because deep down, you know you're showing the world a filtered version of your heart. The danger of people-pleasing is that it teaches your nervous system that love must be earned, that you have to perform to be worthy. But the real kind of love, the healing kind, never asks you to shrink yourself. It asks you to show up raw and perfect and real. So the next time you feel that pressure to say yes just to keep someone happy, pause. Ask yourself, am I giving from love or from fear? Because when you start choosing love for yourself, something magical happens. You stop chasing acceptance and start attracting respect. You stop performing and start belonging. And most importantly, you stop disappearing in rooms where you were meant to shine. Self-doubt doesn't barge in overnight. It grows in the cracks of comparison, criticism, and unmet expectations. It's planted by every person who made you feel too much or not enough. Over time, you start outsourcing your worth, letting others decide when you're good, smart, or lovable. It starts small. You question your choices, your instincts, your ideas. You over-explain, apologize for existing, or seek validation just to breathe easier. You tell yourself you're being humble, but really you're terrified of being seen because somewhere deep inside, you've mistaken confidence for arrogance and self-trust for pride. Here's the truth most of us run from. Self-doubt isn't humility. It's self-rejection in slow motion. It's your inner critic trying to protect you from failure, not realizing it's also protecting you from growth. And this is where the healing begins, when you finally realize that courage doesn't mean never doubting yourself. It means not letting doubt drive the car. It means saying, I don't have to feel ready to be worthy. Every time you silence your own wisdom to please others, you send your heart the message you can't be trusted. But when you listen, when you trust that tiny pull inside you, something shifts. You start moving not from fear, but from alignment. You begin to remember you have survived storms you thought would destroy you. You have rebuilt from ashes that no one thought could rise again. So stop asking if you're enough. Start believing you already are. Because self-trust isn't arrogance. It's coming home to yourself. There's a heavy price for silence. And it's not just exhaustion, disconnection, or doubt. It's the slow unraveling of your peace. When you keep ignoring the warnings your heart sends, you start living in survival mode, calm on the surface, chaos underneath. You smile through the ache. You say, I'm fine, while your soul whispers, I'm not. You keep performing strength until it becomes your prison. And the saddest part, the world applauds you for it. They call you resilient, tough, unbreakable, but inside you're quietly breaking. Ignoring those subtle signs doesn't make them disappear. It only makes them louder in disguise. Emotional exhaustion becomes apathy. Disconnection turns into loneliness. Overthinking becomes anxiety. People-pleasing becomes resentment. And self-doubt becomes paralysis. That's a chain reaction. The slow, silent collapse that happens when you stop listening to yourself. And I get it. Listening is hard. Facing what hurts means you might have to change things. Relationships, boundaries, the way you've always lived. But here's what's harder, losing yourself one compromise at a time. Peace isn't found by avoiding discomfort. It's found by facing truth. It's not the absence of noise. It's the presence of alignment. When you ignore your inner voice, you drift from who you are. But when you start listening again, you return home to calm, to clarity, to authenticity. You begin to rebuild the bridge between your mind and your heart. So pause for a moment. Ask yourself, what part of me have I been silencing? Because healing doesn't begin when life finally gets easy. It begins the moment you decide to stop betraying yourself for the comfort of others. There comes a moment, a quiet, powerful moment, when you finally stop running, you stop numbing, you stop pretending that everything's fine. That moment, my friend, is not weakness. It's awakening. It's the turning point where your soul whispers, it's time to come home. Listening to your soul doesn't mean your life suddenly becomes easy. It means you start choosing truth over comfort. You start paying attention to the soft inner signals that once felt inconvenient, the hesitation before saying yes, the tension in your chest when something feels off, the fatigue that isn't physical but emotional. You begin to realize those feelings weren't obstacles, they were messages. Messages that were always trying to protect you, to guide you back to what's real. This turning point isn't loud or dramatic, it's subtle. It's that night you finally admit you're not okay. It's the morning you wake up and decide you don't want to carry what's not yours anymore. It's the moment you say, I want peace more than I want approval. And that's where the real transformation begins, not in fixing yourself, but in finally hearing yourself. When you start listening, you reconnect with your intuition, that deep, unwavering voice that's been waiting beneath the noise. It doesn't shout, it nudges. It says, this is who you are. This is what you need. The more you honor that voice, the more life begins to feel lighter, not because it's perfect, but because it's honest. You stop chasing validation and start choosing alignment. You stop surviving and start living, because listening to your soul isn't about finding answers outside. It's about remembering that the wisdom you've been searching for has always lived within you. When you start listening to your soul, something beautiful and terrifying happens. You begin to reclaim your power. And that power doesn't roar. It doesn't demand. It simply decides. It decides what you will no longer tolerate, what you will no longer explain, and what you will no longer carry. Setting boundaries isn't about pushing people away. It's about pulling yourself back to where you belong. It's saying, I love you, but I love me too. It's the courage to draw a line, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Because you finally understand you can't build peace in a space where your truth is constantly sacrificed. Reclaiming your power begins the moment you realize you're not here to please, to prove, or to perform. You're here to be, to live in a way that honors your energy, your values, and your peace. Boundaries are love with structure. They protect what's sacred inside you. Without them, everything good, your joy, your creativity, your confidence, leaks out drop by drop. You become exhausted trying to keep everyone happy while your soul quietly starves. But with boundaries, something shifts. You stop apologizing for needing space. You stop explaining why you walked away. You stop negotiating your worth with people who refuse to see it. And that's when life begins to flow differently. You attract people who respect your no, who value your presence, who meet you with reciprocity instead of expectation. Boundaries aren't walls, they're the doors. They don't close you off. They protect your peace so the right things can finally enter. So reclaim your power, stand firm in your truth. Because when you stop abandoning yourself for love, you finally create space for real love to find you. There comes a quiet moment, not dramatic, not loud, when you finally realize you've come home, not to a place, not to a person, but to yourself. That's what all these warnings were about from the beginning. They weren't punishments. They weren't chaos meant to break you. They were calls, gentle, persistent invitations to return to the truth of who you are. You were never meant to live burnt out, disconnected, anxious, or small. You were meant to live awake, grounded in your truth, guided by your soul, and brave enough to choose peace over pretending. When you start honoring the whispers instead of waiting for the breakdowns, everything shifts. Your boundaries strengthen, your energy softens, your relationships deepen, not because you're doing more, but because you're finally being real. You begin to see that your power was never in controlling the storm. It was in learning to stand still within it. You realize that healing doesn't mean you never fall apart again. It means you know how to return to yourself every single time you do. And that's the journey, not perfection, not performance, but presence. To wake up every day and choose to live aligned with your truth, even when it's uncomfortable. To honor your emotions instead of running from them. To say, I am worthy of peace, even before I've earned it. So if you've been missing the whispers, pause, listen, because your soul never stopped speaking. You just stopped hearing. You are not lost. You're being called back, one truth, one boundary, one brave decision at a time. This is your return. Your reminder that the life you've been seeking isn't somewhere out there, it's within you.